going on?
Man, chilling, man. How about yourself?
Same thing. Same thing.
Cool.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I came across your story probably a year and a half ago, and I know my brother helped out with some things with Mission Green.
Yeah, with the launch, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of put this on the list of when I get to my podcast and start doing some things, wanting to make sure I reached back out. So thank you again. And I think for those who aren't familiar, I definitely want to make sure we kind of in the front end lay out your story, but I really want to kind of then go back and talk about the lead up to it and really get into Weldon the guy, like who's Weldon the person, because I think the story about what happened to you is even more impactful when you understand who the person is or who went through that, right? So
Right.
if you can maybe just lay it out, you were early 2000s arrested in a sting operation, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it was 2002. Do you want me to go back further, or do you want me to take it from there?
Well, let's start there. Let's just kind of give the real quick synopsis of like what happened, and then maybe we can go back to a little bit before it happened and kind of start there and tell the longer story.
So the local authorities, I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. I was bringing, because I was working in LA, I was in the music industry, and I was bringing a lot of artists out here to Salt Lake City, Utah, to try to, get the industry out here going. I brought Snoop out. We did a video called A Little More Dope to Smoke. And it was kind of a funny video to a song that we had done. And the local authorities got a hold of the raw footage from an informant who was in our circle. And they used that to start off an investigation. They wanted to know what I was doing with all these rappers and weed. And so they sicked this informant on me to purchase some marijuana. And he actually only purchased a few $100s 3 times. And with that, he started asking for guns and drugs and meth and coke. And we're like, nah, man, get out of here. I don't fool with that. And so they had nothing else. And like 6 months later, they kept trying to get me through other people, and I just didn't bite. I was making good money in the music industry, and they finally submitted the case to the federal government, and I got indicted. A crafty prosecutor turned those 3 weed sales into a 20-count federal indictment, where I was facing 105 years at trial. I went to trial, of course. I wouldn't accept their plea offer. They wanted me to serve 15 years for 1 weed sale worth $300. And I said no. So I went to trial, and I won some counts, lost others, and I got a mandatory 55-year sentence. That was a minimum. And, the judge who was, forced to impose it was the conservative George W. Bush appointee. And we thought, because he could have given me, 65 years, and we thought he was probably going to give me, more than the minimum, but it ended up being that he actually was against the punishment. He thought it was ridiculous. He sentenced a murderer an hour earlier to a maximum of 17 years. And so he looked at this case. He's like, the minimum I can give you is 55. Have you been prosecuted in the state offense? Because one of the state probation officers reached out to my judge and said he would have gotten 6 months or maybe even probation in the state level. And so my judge is like, this makes 0 sense. But his hands were tied. So he said, the only thing I can do is call on the president to commute your sentence. And so he went down kicking and screaming, basically.
Wow.
So
okay.
I grew up in a single parent home. My dad was disabled, so we grew up on welfare. My mom left when I was 4, so we were living in government housing. We had literally nothing. And so, I think I gravitated more towards hip hop. And so, because I felt when they talked about the struggle, and so I wanted to make hip hop. And when Snoop Dogg came out, I was like, oh man, this is the dopest shit I ever heard. And so, I started going out to LA because I had family out there, and went out there and stayed one summer. And, we started going to the recording studios in LA because the ones in Salt Lake just didn't have the quality we were looking for. And I started bumping into people from Death Row Records, like the Dog Pound, Tupac's Outlaws, and started working with them. Eventually I befriended a couple of them, and, they taught me the industry. My best friend was from Tupac's group, the Outlaws. And so, just being around them, and then, I just started growing up around them. I ended up on Snoop's couch, hanging out, recording songs in his, in his Claremont mansion. And Eventually I ended up signing a record deal. I think it was in 99 or 2000. I signed a major record deal, and I did a whole album for Snoop Dogg called We From the LBC. And so, being out here in Salt Lake, a lot of people, no one out here made it in hip hop. So I was like the first person that's actually doing major things with the big artists. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was even getting ready to do stuff with Eminem before I got arrested. So I went out and did a song with his group D12 in Sacramento, where my partner was from, and Razzcast and all them out there. And I'm like, yo, I want M. M walked in the hotel room, and I'm like, how can I get him? They connected me with his manager, and they're like, yo, we're going to be on your 2 albums. And when I got back from that trip is when I got arrested.
Wow. So things were moving.
Oh, yeah, things were moving. I just did a movie with Snoop, too. We did like this hip-hop movie, and I signed 2 artists. I actually signed one of Tupac's proteges from his group, and I signed one of Snoop's. And I also signed a R&B pop singer named Dante Thomas, who already had went platinum and did stuff with Pink. And we had these albums that were ready to come out. I had an unreleased Tupac song on this album. We were about to get Eminem. I had a gang of Snoop songs and other people. And so, we just signed a big deal. Things were ready to go. And, when I got back, like right when I got to the top was when I got taken down.
And you think probably because of the lack of that type of success traditionally in Salt Lake City area, it just raised a lot of eyebrows. People saw some of who you were involved with and tried to start connecting and building a straw man argument of what they thought you were possibly up to.
Absolutely. They were saying that I was like the West Coast rap industry's gun and drug supplier, which is ridiculous. Why would they need to get stuff from Salt Lake when they're in California? You know what I mean? So it was ridiculous. But, what we later found out when we were doing I'm doing a documentary, and Mark Wahlberg's company had a hand in my doc, and now KG, Kevin Garnett, is, taking it to the next level. And we were interviewing former prosecutors and agents on my case. And, what we found out, some of them said that they looked at me like I was bringing Ebola into Utah, and that if they don't do something about it, they will have invited moral corruption. And so they had to stop me, basically, because I brought Snoop out here. I brought all kinds of acts out to Salt Lake, and we were doing concerts, recording albums. I had an album out where they were representing my city. And, we had all these people talking about it. And so it was getting big, and, they didn't like it. I did an album with Mac Dre, and I know they didn't like Mac Dre, because from the Bay Area, and he was real, gangster. So they didn't like that. And I did an album with him and brought him out here. And yeah, they didn't like it at all.
So like just even culturally from Utah, just kind of ultra conservative.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of people don't know Salt Lake City itself is very liberal. It's very diverse, but the outskirts, when you go outside of Salt Lake City, Provo, all that, those are all, they're all Mormon, they're all conservative, and they don't like that culture. But in the city itself, it's diverse. We had the first openly gay mayor. And so it's like the Salt Lake City is diverse, but you go outside of that and it starts getting rural, and they don't like it. And so they looked at me bringing this hip hop, weed smoking culture into Utah, and they were like, no, we got to stop this.
So when all this started to transpire, did you have obviously probably no idea that somebody that was inside of your circle was taking stuff back and even kind of almost conspiring to set you up in a way?
Yeah, I had no idea. The dude they used was like, he had been to prison multiple times. He was like a violent gang member, and he was like the last person I would think would have done this. And so, and he was doing so much bigger stuff. Like he was working with cartel members, so he could have given up anyone. And actually, we actually spoke to him recently. I didn't, but someone on my team, they want to interview him, and he said that he offered to give up murders, carfuls of meth with the cartel, and they said, no, we want Weldon Angelos. And he was like, he told them even to this day, he don't understand why they turned all that down just for me. And at the end of the day, when they did the year and a half investigating me, all they got was $900 worth of weed. And it was like, they had to do something for it. So they had to make this case bigger than it was, because they spent all that money and all that time, and all they got was $900. So
was this publicized heavily in the news at the time? Or was it
they subpoenaed Snoop Dogg to my trial. So it was really, they subpoenaed all the music industry people I worked with. Not only like one person showed up, but like they subpoenaed the record label I signed with. They subpoenaed, a bunch of different, they tried to make it a hip hop trial. Like the prosecutor started his closing argument in my case, rapping one of the verses from my Mac Dre album. And it was like, I didn't write the lyrics, I produced the album. Mac Dre wrote the lyrics and rapped it, but they were using that against me. And they got this jury who none of them was from Salt Lake City. All the jury in my case were from like Provo and beyond. And so I was scared to death when I seen the jury, and they were looking at hip hop with the bulletproof vest. Cause we wore vests. We went around, and just part of the, industry was dangerous back then. And so, they looked at that, and I had a bunch of legal guns and just, all these, black gangster looking dudes, and they were scared. And so, the conviction didn't surprise me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so conviction, sentenced to 55 years. And you had said, so this was a federal charge that they.
Yep. And it was a mandatory minimum.
Wow. Okay. And where did they send you? Where did ultimately to do your time?
I went to Lompoc, California.
Okay. And kind of going, you had never been in trouble prior to that, never served time. So, I mean, walking into a facility like that, thinking that you're going to do possibly, the rest of your life in jail. What's going through your head?
Yeah, they sent me to a maximum security. So I didn't go to like a federal prison camp, Club Fed. I didn't go to Club Fed. I thought I was going to a camp. I was on the bus because I'm like, weed, first offense, nonviolent. We're driving on the bus, and we stop at the low, let people off. There's two places left, the USP, which is a maximum security, or the camp, where they don't even have a fence, where you're playing golf and whatever. And there's like one dude on there that looks like a straight square. And that's when I knew I was hit, because they're like, we got one person for the camp. And I look at this dude, and he's like, that's me. And I'm like, damn, I'm going to the pen. And so when I got off there, it was just like TV shit. Like when I got out the next day and walked the yard, like you see nothing but the worst of the worst. And so I'm looking like, damn, all this for some weed. It was crazy.
Yeah, no, it's got to be your worst nightmare.
Yeah, it definitely was.
So how long, I mean, was it right away that you realized, like, I'm not going to accept this? Or was there a point in time where you kind of, I don't want to say accepted the fact that you were in prison, but just kind of like, okay, now I got to shift my focus and my energy to staying alive inside of this place and making sure that I understand and learn what's going on around me, because it's not a place where I've been before. Was it a little bit of time before you kind of shifted back into, I'm going to get my ass out of here? Or?
Yeah, well, so when I first got in there, I thought I was getting out in like 6 months. When everyone goes to this, you go into denial. When you get a long sentence in the federal system and you've never been to prison, you're like, this doesn't happen. Someone's going to fix this. Like, this is just something I have to go through. Somebody, a higher court is going to look at this, say, this is wrong, send them back. And we had some good arguments. Like, they did a search and seizure in one of my houses, and they didn't have a warrant. They had a warrant for the car. And instead, they raided my son's house, and they went through everything. They took a bunch of, like, photos of when I was younger, with like guns and weed and just dumb shit when you're young, taking pictures. And then they got a bunch of clothing that was like Snoop Dogg clothing, like Eastsiders and stuff like that. And they used all that as evidence of me being like a gang member. So they said I'm from the Bay Area Crips, I'm from Snoop's Crip gang. Like, they put me in like 3 different gangs. They didn't know what the hell they were trying to do. So that scared the jury. They showed them these pictures of me when I was 14 years old with some guns. Like, we went shooting. My dad, my dad was big on Second Amendment, even though he was old. And so, they took all those pictures and all these clothes of like, different kind of, rap industry, hip hop clothing, and said this is gang attire. These bulletproof vests weren't used for the industry. They're used because they're out shooting people and doing all this crazy madness. So they used that evidence, and that's what scared the jury and got me convicted. So we had a good argument that was an invalid search. My judge wouldn't throw it out. So we went to the appellate court, and we pretty much won at our oral argument. The court's like, yo, this evidence should have never been in there. We need to suppress it. And so my attorneys were celebrating. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be going back for a new trial. I'm going home. And then 2 months later, I get the opinion, and yeah, they threw the evidence out, but they said, oh, it wouldn't have changed the outcome, so we're going to affirm your sentence. And so, man, that was all I had left was that appeal. And after that, it's dimmer and dimmer from there. And so at that point, I'm like, man, I just got to focus and keep my mind in prison, because I was living outside still. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm planning every day what I'm going to get back in the industry, albums I'm going to drop. And then when that came, I just like, I got to get comfortable. I'm going to be here for a while. And so I never gave up, though, because my judge, he did something that no judge had ever done. as he was sentencing me to 55 years, he called on the president to commute my sentence. And no federal judge had ever done that. So he says, while my hands are tied and this sentence is unjust, I call upon the president to fix this and a Congress to change the law that forced him to do that. And so that kept me a little bit of hope. But he didn't say commute a sentence to immediate time served. He says, when he served enough time. And that could be 10 years, that could be 15 years, 12 years, whatever. And so, that was some hope, but it wasn't like any immediate hope. And then so I started, focusing more on, surviving. And then I started, really hitting the law library and really looking into the law and understanding it. And that's when I started fighting to get myself out. And I started just, my sister was the face of my campaign to free me. And I had a lot of media attention. When my judge did that, literally, people from all over the country were reaching out to help. We had 165 former federal judges, former federal prosecutors, former U.S. attorneys general sign on my Supreme Court, because we filed all the way to the Supreme Court, and they actually wrote a brief in support. And so now we have like Janet Reno and all these big political figures jump on and help me. And that's when I started kind of feeling like I had a shot. But I lost that too. And so it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to just do time until a president's elected that is pro-criminal justice reform and will possibly commute my sentence like my judge asked, because I knew Bush wasn't going to do it, and he didn't. When Obama was elected, at the same time Obama was elected, a man named Mike Lee was elected to the Senate. And this guy was actually one of the prosecutors in the office that prosecuted me. His name was Mike Lee, and he was elected to the Senate on the Tea Party movement. He actually was against my sentence. And so when he started working on criminal justice reform, he had reached out to my family saying that he wants to help get me out. And that's sort of where the movement to get President Obama to intervene began. It was like 2011. And we had like people like Bonnie Raitt helping, Mike Epps, Alicia Keys, Snoop Dogg, all these people back then, Senator Rand Paul, and then Mike Lee really picked it up and, took it to the next level. And then other senators followed, like Cory Booker jumped on, Patrick Leahy, and even the Koch brothers. And when it got there, I'm like, okay, I know I'm going home. I just don't know when, but I know I'm going home now.
Man, that's kind of incredible to hear. I mean, especially as we sit here in 2020, so divided in a lot of ways in this country, to think that, I mean, you're naming people that are so contrasting as far as opinion and politics and background, and wow, I mean, that's,
yeah, we called it unlikely allies. They were like unlikely allies, and we really had the most liberal. Like Bonnie Raitt is extremely liberal on the left, and then Mike Lee is the furthest on the right, and the Koch brothers. And so at this point we had already filed for President Obama to commute my sentence, and now I have 5 senators support me. My judge actually left the bench because of my case. He left it probably about a few years after I was sentenced. He said he just didn't want to be a part of the system anymore. And so he became like my number one advocate as well. And having him and, my own senator and all these other people put pressure on the White House. And, eventually I was released after 13 years. I was released on May 31st, 2016.
Wow.
Immediate release.
And so what is that process? I mean, is it, you just get, a visit from your lawyer and they just say, hey, Weldon, it's happened. And like, how long from that point in time until you're walking out the doors? And
in 2015, Obama was commuting hundreds of sentences. Like every 3 months he would commute 80, 50, 100. And like, I got passed up every time. And I'm like, how am I going to get passed up? Like literally I got everybody in the world supporting me. I even had hundreds of former prosecutors and even former Republican governors. I had 4 Republican governors, mayors, former police chiefs. It was just ridiculous, like the most ridiculous amount of support. And so I'm like, my petition was pending for 3.5 years. And other people were getting out who just filed like 6 months ago. And I'm like, someone in the prison I was with, same charges, same everything, filed. 6 months later, he walked out. And I'm like, what? And this was Christmas of 2015. I was so disgusted. Like, why is he not commute my sentence? Like, I fit the criteria that he laid out for people who should get a commutation. And so The next batch came in March, and I wasn't on it either. And I thought for sure I'd be on it. And that's when I was about to give up. I called my attorney, and I'm like, man, I'm done with this. And he said, actually, I got some good news. And so, he didn't tell me what it was, but he said, I think you're going to be released soon. And what was that? That was the end of March. And literally by March 31st, I was told to roll up, and I was just out of there that day. And it was just the craziest thing. I thought I was getting transferred, and they like threw clothes at me, and they were like really janky looking clothes. You know what I mean? But they threw clothes at me, and I'm thinking maybe I'm going on a plane and they don't want me to take khakis or whatever. I don't know what's going on. And they said, you got a number for us to call for a ride? And that's when I knew it was real. And that was crazy.
Wow. Yeah. No, I can't possibly wrap my mind around what that whole experience must have been like for you. And coming out after 13 years, the world changes so much. And
oh man, cell phones.
What kind? Yeah, little things like that. What kind of culture shock is that? And as far as a transition back into normal everyday life.
Yeah, it was difficult being in groups, or even in crowds. I went to the mall with my sister to try to get clothes. When I first got out, I didn't tell anyone. I was like, I need to get a haircut. I need to get some clothes. I need to, clean up.
You're free and clear, no parole, no nothing. And I'd almost have to think those types of aspects, although, also beneficial for the state to keep tabs on people who, they may feel are still somewhat of a risk. It's got to be a benefit for people coming out, because it's like a little bit of structure still and accountability as they make their way into the world. And then they're just like, yo, Weldon, peace.
Well, yeah. So I wasn't on parole or probation or anything, but they have in the feds what's called a supervised release, where they just kind of keep an eye on you. And I did that for 18 months, and then I was completely off. And basically it's, you just, they just want to know you're doing good. You don't have to I don't take drug tests or anything like that, but I just checked in once a month, online. We're yeah, I'm working, I'm doing this, doing that, and that's it. So it was pretty easy. And they figured I've done way too much time already. 13 years for $900. They're they really left me alone. You know what I mean? But some people that need it, if you got a lot of convictions and it's more restricted, where they're they monitor you. But I was just on the minimal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but when I got out, it was just crazy, because I went into the mall with my sister to get clothes, and it was just I ran out because I couldn't handle being around people. And then the cell phone, I literally freaked out on my sister because she kept texting me, and it was just ding, ding, ding. I'm like, stop fucking texting me shit. I was freaking out because it was just so much. I'm used to just a phone with numbers to call somebody. You know what I mean? I had those big, thick, Nokias that you could knock someone out with. And to have this one with all the social media and everything, it was just so much information overload. And it took me a while, man. It was crazy. I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. I was going to bed at 12:30, waking up at 2:30, and just every day, just crazy. Adrenaline rush too, just being out. It was wild. Mm. What was crazier though was being out and weed's legal in all these places, because when I got out, I went straight to LA. I was going to all these different places, and just seeing cannabis being legal when I just lost 13 years of my life because of it. And that was the craziest part. I was in there with my friend Luke Scarmazzo, who's probably more deserving of a release than I was. He just followed state law and had a medical dispensary in Modesto. And at the tail end of the Bush administration, they'd prosecute him. He got 22 years, following state law to the T, but it's federally illegal. And so, they went to trial. They offered him 10 years. He's like, I'm not 10 years for following state law. You're tripping. And so he went to trial, lost, got 22. Me and him were in there watching legalization happen across the states, and me and him were tripping out every day, and they're keeping us in here.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I got to imagine you guys are aware. You're aware of that inside, knowing that the laws have been changing, and you're still sitting there. And it kind of, it's crazy, but today there's still people sitting.
Oh yeah, and that's what people don't know now. I was at one of these stores, I think it was Medman or someone. I was asking people that I was in there, I was just testing consumers, and I'm like, and I tell them about what I'm doing, and they're like, people are still going to prison. They're like, what are you talking about? It's legal. I'm like, it's not legal. The state legalized it, but it's still illegal federally. Any given time, the federal government can go into any dispensary, any grow op, and indict everyone there, and they're going to go to prison, and they can leave everyone else alone in the community, just that one store, and they can't do anything about it. No one can say anything. It's perfectly legal. It's not even, because Luke tried saying, they violated equal justice principles. Like, there's a dispensary down the street from us. You didn't prosecute them, and the feds can get away with it. And so people don't know that. Unless you're medical right now, that's the only people that are protected because of the rider, the congressional rider that's been introduced every year. And that rider protects Luke. So today, Luke couldn't even be prosecuted because he was only medical. So that's crazy that he's still in there for, he's got 10 more years left, and he couldn't be prosecuted today. So that's a crazy thing.
What's his name again?
Luke Scarmazzo.
Luke Scarmazzo.
Yeah, he was one of the early people. He found his dispensary, I think, in 2004 or 5. He was way in the beginning, like when they first started doing. It was called CCC, I believe. Yeah, I mean, he got 22 years. His friend Ricardo was his co-defendant. They were co-owners. He got 20, and I helped get him out. I wrote their petitions to President Obama, and the administration only granted Ricardo's and denied Luke's, and they got the same case. And so that just kind of shows you how messed up our system is. Even when it tries to help people, it doesn't do a good job at it.
Yeah, and it's fucked up because is it a problem because of just how many people there are? And I guess some people who are in high positions, they look at things at just a numbers level, and to them it's like,
it's all just numbers.
But it's like, even if there's one person, that's a life, that's years. I mean, I know you lost 13 years you had 2 sons, right?
Yep. Got out and they were grown. They had facial hair, and it was crazy. And so, one problem with the Obama administration's clemency program was that he did something, and I think this is the only stain that I know on his legacy. He let prosecutors decide who should get clemency. And, it was still happening even in the Trump administration until now. They created a new clemency committee that bypasses the DOJ because someone, back in the 1930s decided the Department of Justice should be over the pardon office. And so now the pardon office is in the Department of Justice. The same entity that prosecutes you gets to decide whether they made a mistake or whether they were too harsh, and they're not in the business of second guessing their work. How many times do you think a prosecutor and say, I think I was too rough on that guy. Let me recommend a commutation. That doesn't happen. And so Obama forced them, and his attorney general was like, you must give us these cases that fit this criteria. And although Luke fit the criteria, his prosecutor took his activism personal, and she denied it. Ricardo was just quiet, went to trial with Luke, didn't say anything. Luke was an activism. He said, I believe I have a right to sell this under state law. It's our right. And so he fought tooth and nail, and he was very loud and vocal, and they took that personal. And so, Obama making that mistake of letting prosecutors make this decision, they looked at Ricardo like, oh, he's the quiet one, let him out. Luke's the one that's going to get out and be loud and be an activist. We don't want that. Let him stay in there.
Yeah, that's, I don't know how, if there could be a law, or if there's things that are out there proposed now to make it law, but unless there'd be some additional action that occurred after the fact, there should be no way that one person gets out and the other doesn't for the same crime. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, and so one thing we're doing now, and this is something that we sort of wrote the blueprint of, when I helped pass what's called the First Step Act. When I got out of prison, I know Obama was still in office, but when he left, the Trump administration invited me to the White House. And so I started attending these summits, and, Mike Lee was there. The Koch brothers were there, I mostly went with them because I was working with them while I was in prison. And so, we worked on what's called the First Step Act, and the First Step Act changed the law that gave me 55 years. So today, no prosecutor can take that lethal mandatory minimum and threaten people either to cooperate or to take a deal that's unjust. It's gone. So the maximum they could have made me get would be 15 years, but it's likely I would have gotten 5 today. But I mean, they're not even prosecuting marijuana anymore, so I wouldn't have gotten any charge today. It would have been a small little state charge, if that. So we passed this law. Mike Lee was amazing, and Cory Booker. I worked with both of them on helping pass this, and Van Jones and a bunch of other people. It was a big coalition of unlikely allies. So we reformed 4 aspects of the criminal justice system for the sentencing, like for the mandatory minimums. And one thing we did that was sort of didn't get a lot of fanfare, and we did it kind of on the low, was they amended what's called compassionate release. Compassionate release was traditionally for people who were over 70 years old or who were critically ill, like you were terminal because of cancer or something where you didn't have much time left. Well, now the First Step Act changed it where a judge can look at anyone's petition and find if there's an extraordinary, compelling circumstance, they can reduce their sentence. And since that happened, there's been 650 grants, and the First Step Act just passed, not too long ago. Hasn't even been, I don't even think it's been 2 years yet. Wow. And so 650 people got out. And so judges were granting this for the people whose the law changed, but it wasn't retroactive. And so I was talking to Luke saying, well, the fact that your state's legal recreationally, right? The fact that there's a rider that protects you from being prosecuted, and the fact that the government's not prosecuting people in California, I think that constitutes an extraordinary, compelling circumstance.
I would agree.
So we argued this in Luke's case right now, and then we're saying that not only that, his co-defendant got clemency and he didn't. And so the only right thing to do would be to let him go. He's already served 12 years. Even if you agree, okay, it's illegal federally, 12 years is enough. Let him go. And so we wrote this for everybody who's in there for marijuana. We made the argument so anyone with the marijuana case, especially if you're in a state where it's legal now and wasn't legal when you were prosecuted, can make this argument. And so we're doing it in Lance Glor's case, Luke's case, and a few other cases, because if Luke's case wins and sets this precedent, nearly anyone in there for cannabis can get out with this provision.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
So we're hoping it wins. This is a test case for us.
What can people do that are hearing this or watching this? Is there something they can do? Are there petitions they can sign? Are there, places that they can go to make a difference?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you go to the weldonproject.org, there's guidance on there. But people can get behind us and help us support these. I know our next project we're going to do, I don't know if you heard, in February, I went to the White House and I hand-delivered a letter to the president's staff that asked him to start commuting sentences like Luke's, because he may or may not get out through court action, but there's other people just like him. And, I use Luke's case as an example, and we've had bipartisan support on this letter. NBA star Kevin Garnett signed it, actor Danny Trejo, former Governor Gary Johnson, former federal prosecutors, former Republican senators, and a bunch of people signed it from both sides. And so I took this letter to the White House. We brought cameras in, and I established a rapport with their office about this one issue that I'm putting all my focus on right now. And so I want to go out there and do a vigil, and I want to bring the pictures of all the people in there for cannabis cases like Luke's. And I want to do a vigil outside the White House, not to protest, not to criticize the president, but to ask him to do this. And so that's going to be Mission Green's next project. And I could have my White House contact meet us outside, and I'll give him a list of all the people who we believe fit this criteria and who can be released immediately.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so people want to support. That's one way they can support us get to there, because I want to bring our team out there and bring a camera crew and create some really dope content. And I think the way to get the president to act is to not, criticize him, but I think just call on him to intervene in this. I mean, you see people all the time. He goes on the news and they're like, "Hey, pardon the Tiger guy." He's like, "Should I?" You know what I mean? So, and I got contacts with a lot of celebrities. So, and he loves celebrities. So I feel like the best way is to, appeal to him, and using these various strategies rather than, criticizing them. And so far it's worked. I mean, we had someone sentence commuted in February. There was a female who got 20 years for a cannabis case, and she didn't even touch any of the weed. And so she got commuted. She had 15 years in, so, saved her 5 years.
Yeah, man. It's really interesting, right? Because we're in such a polarizing time with politics, and not everything is so black and white. And I think your situation shows that when people, because we're all humans, right? It's like, if we can get together on a human connection and we can focus on the things like this, I can only imagine that this turns into a snowball effect and makes change positively across everything. It's like, we should be highlighting this. This should be talked about on CNN, right? Like, I get it. There's a lot of other things that are important we need to shine lights on in this time. But man, where's the positive stories about things like this that can lead to more positive stories,
Absolutely. And we're trying to mimic that coalition that got me out. If we were able to get these, Snoop Dogg and Charles Koch, like, I actually brought them together at South by Southwest.
Yep.
And, Charles Koch funds the most conservative, lawmakers across the country and judges. And I brought Snoop Dogg there, and we built a bridge, and we worked together, and we got change. That's how you do it. You can't cut with one scissor blade. So you need to bring both sides together. And so that coalition that got me out, I want to use those connections that I made with all those wonderful people on getting other people out of jail. And so, and what we really need is we need the cannabis industry to step up and help us, because, we're uniquely suited to get this done. I know we haven't gotten into how I, formed or my mission or anything like that, but let me start. So after we passed the First Step Act, I knew that my friend Luke wouldn't benefit from it. We were celebrating at the White House, everyone was giving speeches, and, there was Democrats even in there. We saw like movie stars in there, like Vivica Fox was there, a bunch of people. I'm like, so, it was cool. But then I started thinking, like, wait a minute, I'm celebrating, but Luke and people who are the most deserving, because it's freaking illegal right now. And there's people making millions and billions of dollars, but you're keeping select people in prison. So the fact that Luke didn't benefit from the First Step Act made me, like, the day I got home from DC, I'm like, I'm launching a nonprofit to do something about this. And so, we came up with the Mission Green Initiative, and, like, we're going to focus exclusively on people in there for cannabis. And, I figured I can bring my entertainment contacts together with my political contacts and get a lot done. And I invited everyone to the table in cannabis. We had some early supporters from, I know like you said, your brother helped us do the launch party, and Weed Maps helped fund it, Famous Farms, Bloom, and a few other people. And so, with just that launch alone, we were able to get someone out of prison. And so, I want to continue doing that. And so right now we really need the cannabis industry to get behind us. And right now, they're seeing like all the protests and everything. So, some of them companies are starting to reach out to us now and like wanting to get behind us because they see what we can do. Like, we can literally save lives if we get people behind us.
That's awesome, man. You guys were actually, that's to think that you brought people together for that night. You were a thought leadership, and to take that and turn it into getting somebody out of prison, that's so heavy.
And there's so many more. Like, literally the Luke case, I've self-funded Mission Green from after that night on. Like, we've been doing it ourselves, and I've been doing so much. Like, some days I'll spend 5 days straight writing motions on behalf of cannabis prisoners because they can't afford an attorney. So I'll do the legal work for them. I literally sit home and write their motions and file them in court for them. But think if we could do this on such a higher level, if we can get the industry behind us, we can mimic what we're doing with Luke on all. There's a couple thousand, probably 3,000 people in federal prison for cannabis. Now, we're not going to be able to get them all out unless Congress changes the law. But there are some compelling cases like Luke's, and some are females that shouldn't be in there in the first place, that we could get out if we come together. And so, we're trying to partner with as many companies as possible. Vanks reached out to us, and they want to get behind this initiative. And if we can be, get fully funded and take it to the level we can, we could get a lot done. Like, I literally got access to the White House. I could bring these companies and have a seat in front of Jared Kushner, and we could talk about releasing cannabis prisoners and reforming cannabis law. We need to fix the banking system. Obviously, they need to have access, and we need to end prohibition. And so that's like, one of our other goals, even though our first goal is freedom, but if we end prohibition, that'll result in their release as well.
Man, it seems like it's such a huge mountain to climb. I'm glad that there's a guy like you that's leading the charge, man. It's really, really inspiring.
Yeah, the pieces are all there. We just have to execute, and we're doing it on a smaller level, but I would like to take it to the next level. And I think if Luke's case wins, and we'll know in the next couple of weeks, that's going to be a huge precedent that we can mimic, all throughout the country.
I'll make sure I keep on top of that and share it with everybody. No, man,
we'll have a ruling any day, and then we can take it to the next level. And the reason why I'm focusing on federal system is because, say if like states like California, when you go legal, they provide a mechanism to release the people in prison for marijuana. Now, Michigan hasn't done such a good job because Michael Thompson's still in prison, even though it's legal. And so we're getting behind his case. I've been supporting him for a while. I got him on MTV, and we're working to get him out. But other states, like California and Washington, they provide a mechanism to release people and expunge the records. And so the federal system, there's nothing. Like, if every state in the country can legalize cannabis, and people in federal prison will still be there.
So from a state level, I mean, I guess because federally it's a little bit different on how change occurs. And I think you're kind of leading things almost on a forefront to keep the pressure on at the highest aspects of the federal government. But on a state level, I'm going to flip it around. Is there anybody that's really the roadblock to this, that when it comes time for people to go out and vote and to put their voices out there to be heard on this topic, where they can change? Because if there's, I mean, how many people are, doing other things that people are voting them into office for because they think that they're doing a great job, but they don't know that that's the one person that may be standing in the way of people's freedom.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we found that like voting's not enough. You got to hold them accountable. You got to hold them just like I was a Cory Booker fan. When he was running for president, I was super excited because I know he really cares. And he said he was going to commute 17,000 sentences on day one, and I believe him. With Joe Biden, he was like, oh, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that. He's getting pressured to do it, but he's not running on it. And so, he may not do it when he gets into office. And so a lot of people are excited about, getting rid of Donald Trump, but is it going to be better for cannabis? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Because politics are crazy. When someone gets in office, sometimes they don't always do what they said they were going to do. Now, I believe, honestly, the Democratic Party will force Joe to, take that stance. But a lot of people have gotten elected on promises to do things, and when they got in office, completely went the other way.
Yeah, that's true. That's all we can do is hope and keep the pressure.
Yeah, but change is coming on, on a grassroots level, and more states are going to keep legalizing, and soon the federal government's not going to have a choice but to legalize it. And then we got to decide: do we want the feds in the business of regulating this, or do we want them completely out and just take it out of the federal code? And that's sort of the debate now. Like, do we want them, over-regulating us, or do we want them just to get out of the business completely?
Yeah, I know. If you look at California, I think there's a pretty strong, viewpoint that maybe too much control is not going to be the answer to success.
That's my fear with the federal government.
Yeah, but shit, man, it's I still, I commend you for all your work. Somebody that spent time in prison could certainly have a selfish outlook when they get out, especially with what you left behind. Any dabble back in the music industry, or are you just kind of full focused on driving Mission Green and making sure that things kind of get up off the ground?
Yeah, right now I'm really focused on this. I mean, I still have music industry contacts. I'm also I'm actually working on getting rappers out of prison too. My friend Loon from Bad Boy Records is in there. Hopefully he'll be out in the next month. Ty Dolla $ign's brother's in there. I'm working on that case, and Ty's a good dude. I'm hoping he's gonna join us and join the fight as well. And I'm also trying to get in the industry as well. We launched a cannabis brand called Reform Cannabis with 2 E's. I put reefer and reform together, and that has a cause behind it as well. So basically, proceeds from Reform Cannabis are going directly to people's commissary accounts in prison. Because while Mission Green's fighting to free them, I asked them, what else can I be doing for you? What else can we do to help you? I know, freedom takes its time. And they said, well, we could use some consistent, assistance, because, I remember when I was in there, sometimes like when all my music money ran out from lawyers and everything, I had to choose between calling my sons on Christmas or, getting some hygiene products, and it's messed up. And I heard a story about a young lady who was in there for cannabis, or an older lady actually. She had to pick between buying tampons or calling her family on a holiday. And so she picked calling her kids and using toilet paper. And I'm like, that's disgusting. That's crazy that they're not providing this. And so with Reform Cannabis, we are pledging to provide commissary money for the life of the brand and we'll get as many people as we can. As we grow, so will our giving, and so will our advocacy.
That's awesome. That's so cool, man. You're like completely cornering the entire problem and providing resources. That's so helping people get out, providing legal resources. You're helping them as far as funding while they're inside, entering society on as they're coming out. And
yeah, we're even trying to get them jobs when they come out. That's why we're working with Vankst, and even Kaliva is one of our partners where, we can help get people back in the industry when they get out. And so I just know what I went through and what it's like to struggle in prison with no money sometimes and no support. And so not everyone in there has celebrity friends and politicians and stuff. So I've made that promise. When I'm leaving, Luke, look to me, don't forget about me. I said, I'm going to do whatever I can to get you out. So.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So as far as social media, you're at at Weldon Angelos, correct? And then
Yes, at Weldon Angelos.
at Project Mission Green is the
Correct.
foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Where else can people find information?
Or the websites, theweldonproject.org or reformcannabis.com with 2 E's, reformcannabis.com. And our what's our Instagram is reef_form or orm, yeah. That's our cannabis brand.
Okay, awesome. Well, Weldon, man, I really do appreciate you hopping on here with me. And
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
for sure. We'll keep in contact, and I want to make sure I keep on, as far as real time, making sure that anything we can do to help or push out information for your cause and everybody's cause, that we're able to do that. But thank you again, man, and keep fighting the fight. And we wish you and everybody a ton of luck in making this happen. So
thanks, bro. Appreciate it.